Welcome to the General Magic panel. When you first watch the movie, you think this is an amazing story on the history of technology, right? How the iPhone, the smartphones that we use, all of us, every day, was invented. And I actually saw the binder that Mark keeps in his house with the first drawing, almost hand-drawn by you, right? Of the interface with apps. I mean, it looks exactly like the iPhone. And that's a piece of history in the world of technology that's really amazing to see. But really, I do think that once you watch it more than once, you realize that it's not just a story about technology and innovation, but it's really a story of something else. And Mark loves to talk about that. So maybe we can start with a question. What is General Magic a story of?
Good. I was going to stand up and not
please.
use the mic, if that's okay.
Yes.
You know, I think you said everybody should sit in the front. I'm actually going to stand here near you. So turn around your chair so we can, because over here I don't need a mic because of the geometry of the cupola. So, and I can also see it, which is good.
Unless that globe falls.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's not that I want to be in the center of things. It's just better than a mic. So what, if you haven't seen the film, how many people saw the film so I can calibrate? Oh, a lot. Oh, okay, good. And those who haven't, I hope you do for the following reason. General Magic obviously is known as an origin story. You're holding an iPhone, and the question is, where did that thing come from? With all the apps and the cloud and all of that. And the answer is, for all these things, things come from somewhere. They're all derivative, but they come from somewhere. And we were given credit because of the generosity of the producers and the directors for having been an origin story. So in some sense, it's an origin of a technology that two of our engineers who are sitting there and there, Tony Fadell and Andy Rubin, are now went on, Apple and Google, iOS and Android, responsible now for 98% of all the smartphones on the planet, which is kind of extraordinary. So it's a technology, it's a business story, because at the end of the day, the business did not work. It was so far ahead of its timing. So there's a business story. You saw in that kind of dramatic little clip, there's conflict. There's a protagonist, there's always an antagonist. You can't have a good film without both. And the filmmakers are just kind of brilliant. And they give me and us way more credit than we deserve, but it's a good film. It's a really good 3-act film, so it's good to see. But for me, and I think even for the directors and the producers, Mike Stern, big hand to him. He helped fund the whole thing. He's our general counsel, brilliant guy. It ended up, when I speak with people, it ended up not being an origin story, not being a tech story, not being a business story, but being a human story. It's the human, and for me personally, it was exactly what it was, a human story. And because it didn't work as a business, it crushed me. I was crushed, and those of you who have seen the film can see that. So when the directors and the producers came to me and said, let's make a movie about General Magic, because we have footage from everything, and it's like an amazing story, and it needs to be told, my answer was, no. No way. Why? Because we, as humans, when we go through a trauma, or which for me it was, when we go through a difficult episode, we try and patch it, we try and heal it, we try and distance ourselves, and we don't want to rip the Band-Aid off. And we don't want to replicate, things, experiences. That's the human story. And I was not going to show my vulnerability. And I had to. That's what they wanted. Movies are not cognitive creatures, they're emotional creatures. Any movie, any documentary that's there to teach you pedagogy is a crappy documentary. It's all these things are art forms, and art is about emotion. I wasn't going to go back into that. Why should I? Why would I? It was too painful. And Sarah Karouche, who's not here today, the director, took me to my studio, art studio, and said, you're going to do it. And the reason you're going to do it is because it's a story that needs to be told. It's a story that is common to all of us, and it's important to legitimize, to in some sense, support the pain that we all carry around, as well as the pleasure of doing something. very high, so General Magic for me was a very high benefit, very high cost experience. It was a very joyful peak experience, and it was probably the most damaging thing that's happened to me in my life. Yes, I've moved on. Yes, I've healed. Yes, I've got a 7-year-old and 2 little 4-year-olds, a boy and a girl. You know, so it's all fine. And now I'm doing a project that I just love, you know about. It's called Planet X. I'll be talking to you about that, not today, but later. But I said no. You're right. I said no. And she convinced me to do it. And I'm now, in retrospect, happy that I did it because of the impact that it's made on people, as reported to me, that it made a real difference. There are people in this room, I'm told, who cried when they saw the film. That is the most wonderful effect of the film. Not that I want to make a sad, tragic film. I don't. We want to participate in. We wanted to make an inspirational film. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment. The inspirational part of it, the reaching up of it, is the human condition that is actually all around here called entrepreneurial. That's what you are engaged in. The reason you're here is because you have hopes and dreams and aspirations. Some of them are at the early stage, some of them are at a later stage, and if they're where I was in 1988 when I drew the first picture, and then 1991, which is the Red Book, for those of you who have seen it, which is actually the iPhone, turns out, didn't know that, which shipped 12 years later. That, for me, was a moment when something interesting, because I knew there was a revolution brewing, and I was kind of a child of revolutions, like Mike. You know, when we grew up, it was all about environmentalism, feminism, counterculture, stop the war in Vietnam, those kinds of things. So revolution is inside my DNA. And I saw this as revolutionary. And the entrepreneurial thing it's hard to define what it is. You must know it, otherwise you wouldn't be here. You're self-selected to be here for a reason. And then it turns from something really interesting to something that takes you over. And you cannot but go into it. You know, they say in Silicon Valley and elsewhere, if people knew how hard it was to start a company and build a company, no one would ever do it. And I heard that in some other context that I thought all of us can relate to. If people knew what falling in love could turn into, the joy of it, and also for some of us, not all of us, not all of you in this room, the pain of it, and then joy again, and then pain. No one would fall in love or get into a relationship. Why would you? It's entirely too painful. And the answer is because it's the same as entrepreneurialism. It's that grip that is deep in our DNA that says, I can't help myself but do that. If you're thinking about your next entrepreneurial idea, you're not there. If you're feeling it passionately and you can't help yourself, you're almost at the brink of starting, your company. It takes an enormous amount of fuel and energy and an explosion of passion. What am I talking about? Starting a company or falling in love? Which one? Anybody know? Both. It takes an enormous bonfire. It takes an enormous creation of energy to then expend it, because the entrepreneurial experience and the other one are not easy. A good friend of mine actually turns out he's a Buddhist, said, being in a relationship is the highest practice that we have. And he meant that in the Buddhist sense of the word. Being CEO of a company and starting a company is a very high practice, personally. I mean, I'll give you one example. Organizing a group of the kind of talented people that we had was amazing. That's the peak joy. That's the burst of fun. That's the, wow, am I lucky to be here? Am I amazingly just eyes wide open, heart is bursting because of the quality, the caliber of the people who are on this journey with me. I don't want to say I was the Pied Piper because I wasn't, but because in HBO there's there's a series called Silicon Valley. Pied Piper was the very funny film series. But there they were. I was the leader. I was the instigator of it, and I had all the responsibility. So the film is about authenticity and vulnerability, but let me tell you, as a CEO, you walk into a room and there is an inauthenticity that sets in as a leader. Why? Because at the same time, you want to be authentic with all the people around you, and you want to be connected. You can't be connected if you're going up and down and gyrating up and down like crazy. To be in a startup is to be able to withstand G-forces that make normal people throw up. It's that dramatic. I could be talking about love too, but I don't want to go there because we don't want to throw up with people we love. But it's hard. You have to withstand. It's one of those, I don't remember what they call them, the big giant dipper things where you go upside down. That's it. That's the experience because of the changes. And you can't actually transmit that to the people who are with you because you'll make them sick. So you have to be inauthentic. You have to walk in and be strong and resilient. So there you go. That's one example of the inauthenticity that comes in. But I don't want to talk about that further, and I want to get back because I'm monopolizing the scarce time that we have, and thank Rebecca for organizing this. Back to love, back to falling in love, back to that metaphor. You are alone, you have aspirations, you look at things and you say, not for me. It's called dating. Okay, not for me. And then it happens. And you don't know why exactly, but it all works, and it erupts. And at that point, when I fell in love with my wife now with the little kids, boy, was it painful. I was absolutely sure she was going to dump me. Why would she want me? I was older. Why would she want me? Well, it turns out she was feeling exactly the same thing. She was in pain. Because why would he want me? So there's the kind of moment of entry that is joyful, but it's also difficult. Anybody relate to that, by the way? Anybody not relate to it? No? Okay, good. And then it erupts, and then it moves, and then it goes, and then it's amazing, and that's all you ever want to do. You breathe it. You can't not breathe it. Every breath is about that. Am I talking about falling in love or starting a company? And then it moves into that phase where it kind of normalizes. In starting a company, we talk about, you probably know this already, you talk about forming, storming, and norming. So the forming part is just joyful. The storming part is even more joyful. You go visit places, then you start norming. And then, inevitably, real life and real world experiences begin to come in. I remember in my vows to Claire, I said, when admin takes over and becomes 90% of your life, let's remember the moment we were in love. When in a startup, when it's like, holy shit, am I really dealing with this level of, crap? Remember the moment when we fell in love with the idea. And there it goes. And if it doesn't work, like this one doesn't work, it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of your life. Even though at the moment, it is absolutely the end of your life. You're done. There's no further future. You're done. You are in pieces on the floor. At least I was. The more you fall in love with the idea and the more responsible you are for it, the more you're going to be on the floor. If you're kind of slightly invested in the idea, then okay, you just move on. If you're dating and it's like, whatever, you move on. If you're deeply, deeply in love, it's very hard to pick yourself up. And that's where I was. But you do. And so all of life, it seems to me, that we've learned that, is ebbs and flows and ebbs and flows and ebbs and flows. There's an enormous duality to life experience. So at the moment you're feeling peak high, peak experience, lurking underneath that are the seeds of a collapse. When you are collapsed, lurking inside that are the seeds of rising. And that's life. So I don't know where you are personally in that ebb and flow. Some of you are ebbing, some of you are flowing, some of you are buoyantly neutral. I have no idea. But that's the way it is. And life is life is very short. I'm feeling that it's short, more than I did when I was, 23. But life is a long time. And there are lots of opportunities. We have an expression, Claire and I do, when something adverse happens, is it's too bad, comma, maybe. Maybe it's too bad that we had such a profound problem. But the maybe part is the optimistic part. It's the part, it's too bad that that love affair collapsed, comma, maybe. Maybe that's the opening of enormous other experiences and personal growth and fun and making a fortune. Who knows what it is? See, I'm mixing metaphors of running a company and love. Because at the end of the day, both of them are profoundly human experiences. Both of them. And I think what brought you to this amazing institution, to sit here at this moment in time, is the awareness that part of your being as a human is bound up in something that is driving you. You're loving something. That's what it is. That's the metaphor right there. Okay, with that, thank you very much.
So there's a reason why when I teach the classes on entrepreneurship and innovation, and I have Mark as a guest speaker, my evaluations at the end of the course are always boosted by 50%. I just had to have you come back every single year.
And that explains why you've never invited me, but I can take it.
He's been in our class. Some of our students have seen you too. I'm gonna pick up on something you said about this human story. Because what's really remarkable about General Magic is the magic that somehow was created between all of these incredible individuals who happened to be in the same room at the same time. So just to recap, people like Tony Fadell, who ended up creating the iPhone, the creators of Android, eBay. They even coined phrases like cloud computing and apps and emojis back when we didn't really have smartphones. And Megan Smith, who ended up being the CTO of the Obama administration and who's a friend of yours. So that magic that I want to compare to the Thunderbird mystique, there's something very special, very bonding. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What was that experience, Mike, and why you wanted to tell the story? Because you had to convince a lot of A-types, who didn't want to revisit the story after 20 years. You had to persuade them to want to have this documented. And so why was this important to you? And before he answers, I do want to tell you a couple of words about Mike, because he's very modest. He's been a startup lawyer, a corporate lawyer in San Francisco and Silicon Valley for 35 years. He was one of the first people in incorporating companies like Cisco, Pixar. He wrote the deal for Toy Story. But I like to call him the Harrison Ford of the legal world in Silicon Valley because, well, first of all, he has his earring and everything, and but he's kind of an activist who's a scholar who knows about Charles Dickens. He's a journalist, and he's a storyteller at the end of the day. And so, with that context, tell us why you wanted to tell this story.
Magic was the most intense. Most profound experience I had. I think we'd all rather listen to Mark, but nevertheless, it was so important in my life. I mean, it changed my life. It made me a different person. In some ways, a better one. One of the things that I learned from Mark, who was my mentor as a businessman, is my nickname at the company was Dr. No, because I always say, yeah, you can't do that. Come on, you must be kidding. That's really stupid. Mark told me how to find the yes in the deal and the solution. Which is a good thing when you're a lawyer, because that's what I went back to being a startup lawyer and helping people solve problems. Lawyers are trained to identify risk. Mark trained me to identify opportunity. That's really important. But it was such an intense experience that I thought we ought to bring it to others. I'm an ex-English professor, so I saw it more in terms of the hero's journey. You go to hell and come back after meeting with the spirits of the dead. To bring something new to life. And it was kind of a Star Wars thing, The Return of the Jedi. When we were storyboarding the movie when the story team was meeting in London, it was sort of that, the Return of the Jedi, the kids, the Tonys, the Megans, the Kevin Lynches, the Andy Rubins, they saw us screw it up, but they came back and did something even more extraordinary. And that seemed like the right kind of story to bring to an audience like this. People who are at the beginning of that process and who can learn from the mistakes and also experience some of the intense joy. We did have a great time, don't you think, Mark?
Oh, awesome.
And we don't want to forget that either. There was joy as well as sorrow.
You mentioned that there were more marriages than divorces, right,
Yeah.
in the company, so that's good.
Yeah, Sarah Karush, who was one of the two directors of the movie, she met her husband at Magic. He was a young evangelist working with Piero Midjar. And she was on the team that filmed all that archival footage. So she was there at the beginning as well. And, and they got married, and they still are. And there were many more romances. I mean, look, the kids, they were all, I was an old married guy with children. I mean, they were there 17 hours a day. There was a lot of sex and drugs and rock and roll. I mean, that's kind of what you do. So, there were many romances and many of them lasted.
I don't know if in today's world, those that have happened, because we have stricter rules around office romance these days. But when we talk about these stories, I think you are referring to this impact. It's not just the entertainment value of having a story told, but there is an outcome that you may expect from these stories, right? And so Veronica, who's also a storyteller herself, she's a director, but has been in so many of these events where she's facilitated these discussions around how people receive this movie, how it lands in them, and what is the emotional reaction, but also the action that is provoked by this movie. And I wanted to ask you about some of the common reactions that you have observed out of the movie. I have seen definitely students get really emotional and get teary in a good way, and people who have really reframed their beliefs and their fears and their understanding of failure. And so tell us some examples of that.
Well, one that comes to mind for me a lot is actually at our Los Angeles premiere. When we premiered the movie in theaters across the United States, one of my friends came who has nothing to do with tech or business at all. She's a singer. And after the movie, she was crying. And that's when it clicked for me that this movie is not about business or Silicon Valley or technology. It's about vulnerability. It's about talking about your fears and failures. And I could just tell that it triggered in her own memories of failing, and it helped her reframe that. And that's kind of, the tears is the most common reaction. And I actually met the filmmakers when they premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival. And I remember the first time I watched it, and this feeling I had when the credits were rolling, it just inspired in me and made me remember the feelings I have about changing the world. And this morning when I was rewatching it, when Mark is introduced in the movie, you say something about how wanting to make the world better because of how your parents left it. I forgot how you phrased it, but what I've been learning about being here at Thunderbird the last day or so, and about GEW, which also we're so grateful to show the film to all of you. Thank you so much. I can just see that with entrepreneurs, that's so important, is I want to change the world. And I think this movie reminds you of that, helps you see that it's possible. And that movies, they're works of art that are designed to be immersive, to put you in someone else's shoes and take you on a journey. So I think they're really powerful tools to help, I don't know, I guess not deepen lessons, but make you not feel alone and make you see what's possible. And I think movies can be used more and more in settings like this to be really powerful ways to help people just want to keep going and feel how they can change the world too.
And that takes me to you, Jeff, because Jeff is, you have seen him in the previous panel, incredible storyteller. But also, I know you have been thinking hard about how to effectively use these stories to create change and impact, especially to entrepreneurs who are facing challenges every single day. So tell us a little bit more about the role of films like this, documentaries, stories, anecdotes, that not only glorify the success cases, right? You have some 20-something-year-old from Stanford who becomes a billionaire overnight. Those stories are not really helpful. I mean, they sometimes inspire, but the real authentic stories of human hardship and challenge, you tell a lot of those. And so,
Sure.
Yes, most of them are about my failures, but
Okay, first of all, hashtag when you accidentally sit down in someone else's panel. I'm not sure what I'm doing here. Was I supposed to be in this panel? I want to say something about something you said because it was so important. When you said that the story doesn't end here, right? Failure is part of it. And part of storytelling is to enable everybody on a journey to realize, as lonely as you feel, someone else went through this. Someone's been there. And what you get out of a documentary like that is even if the world's most brilliant people didn't get everything right, then you're actually allowed to make a mistake, right? And you cut yourself a little slack because these were people, we watch you guys in action, we say they were way smarter than we'll ever be, and they missed the timing. So I had one of those, by the way. I got a chance to give a demo to Bill Gates when I was a young engineer. And I showed him this idea. I mocked up an app where you didn't have to call a travel agent. You could actually book your own airlines and hotels. And he rolled his eyes and said, no one wants to be a travel agent. People have things to do. They're not going to learn to be a travel agent. That's a stupid idea. That was the end of that idea, crushed by Bill Gates. Here's the irony. That hurts. You guys said it, right? And you're right. And the world says, well, you're just not. But if you are, your timing's wrong, so you're still wrong, right? Because all the variables have to fit. It was a horribly crushing moment. But I will say that you fast forward to my phone ringing one day, it's Bill Gates, and I signed a deal with him, and we built Expedia. So a little ironic that apparently people do want to book their own travel. My company built Expedia in a partnership with him before I went off and was part of Priceline and Booking.com. So things come around. Weathering the storm is super hard, but you know what I used to tell my team all the time about failure? I would tell them, it just hurts. I said, you would say, this is Friday when we're closing the company, because I've had some really bad ideas and some that were really good, but no one else but me thought so. On Friday, I would tell them, you can take all day Saturday to cry. You can take all day Sunday to drink, whatever you want to do, but show up Monday because we'll just try something else. Right? That is part of the story. But the reason your documentary is so important is for people to understand that it is entirely about team. It is entirely about passion. The world's best ideas are still sitting on someone's notepad because they didn't have a team and they didn't have the passion and they didn't weather enough of the hard times to even get close. And you guys tell that story very well. Now to actually answer your question about storytelling, it's critically important, right? It is, and that's why we spend so much time on that. We recently, I'm producing a series, it's called Success in the City. And we are defining what success looks like for your generation. And the first one we told was a story of a young man driven by fame and get fame. Everyone's trying to get internet famous or startup rich. They're all focusing on money. They're all focusing on fame. So we told the real story of a guy named Shay. And Shay was a college baseball player. Shay became the third baseman of the Boston Red Sox. Shay was one of the leaders in the American League in home runs. Red Sox go to the World Series. Shay hits 2 home runs in the World Series game. They win the World Series. He gets a new $25 million contract. I'm telling you the way we filmed this. Literally building up to a crescendo. He's on the cover of Sports Illustrated. He's $25 million new deal. He's rich and famous. There's a parade down the center of Boston, and he's standing there, and the whole world loves him. And then the next scene, we cut from the noise of that parade to crickets chirping, birds in the distance on a ranch in Arizona. And he turns to the camera and he says, so anyway, I quit. And then there is a pause, and he said, I'm a youth minister in Arizona now. And he said, fame and fortune ruined my life. And so we tell the story of success, but we won an Emmy for that, actually. So strangely enough, I'm a software engineer, but now I have an Emmy on the shelf for that. We told that to get people to understand, be careful what you wish for, right? And so without that story, I can't tell you how many people have come to us and said, I was chasing the wrong thing. I thought that would make me happy because everyone else told me it would make me happy. I never asked myself what would make me happy, and you share that very well when you talk about your family. Now we're doing that, just one last thing, with entrepreneurs. We're in the middle of producing a brand new show. Unfortunately for you that watch it, I'm on it this time, so I apologize for that. But Jonathan, I, and Jen are partners with it. The show's called Going Public, and it'll air this fall. And it's like Shark Tank, except the viewers get to invest in the companies, not the sharks. But we're trying to democratize investing.
The lawyer in the room is getting really nervous about this.
The SEC must have had a fun
It
couple
took
of
2
years.
years, 2 years to get approval for all this. And Jen is a partner in it. We're the first show that got approved to do a Reg A Plus fundraising on TV. But the more important part isn't that. The more important part is that the companies that we're taking public are underrepresented founders. The first company was 2 minority females. One of them is 2 Air Force veterans. Another one is 2 minority males. We're trying to create opportunities to show this is where you use media. We want you to watch that and say, well, she's just like me. And if she's built a company that's now made it to the point where we're going to take them public, we'll air the actual IPOs live on the NASDAQ. So if you invest, you'll get to see your liquidity. But more importantly, it's the stories of people whose stories don't get told in the startup world. We're going to tell them on TV so that you can identify and say, I was feeling like I didn't have a chance because I don't look like Jeff, I'm not a white male. And people are going to see that there are brilliant people of every shape, size, and color, and we're going to help them succeed, help them get their companies public, so people watching say, if she can do it, I can do it. Without the media, we can't tell those stories.
You also have a Grammy, right? An Emmy and a Grammy?
Equally random for a software engineer. We
Yes.
produced a jazz album because we felt like jazz was disrespected. It's the root of rock and roll and everything else. So we went in the studio and produced a jazz album. And I do remember, because you're talking about team and passion, we got the best musicians in the studio. And one day I was funding it, and one day the team said, you know, no one's ever going to hear this music. And it was a famous moment, and I said, right, but why don't you do everything in life like you're trying to win a Grammy, right? Everything you do, just do it. You may not win a Grammy, but you're guaranteed not to if you don't do it. So you cut to 2 years later, and we're all gathered for dinner in LA the night before the Grammys, and we're sitting there incredulous because we said in the studio, why don't we produce this music like we're trying to win a Grammy? We got nominated for Best Jazz Album, and then we actually won the Grammy that year. That was about team, and that was about passion, just like Mark said.
And because we're talking about failure, how does it feel to have failed to win an Oscar so far?
Failure's not fun. I don't like the Silicon Valley, you gotta fail first, right? Like you literally need to start a company, intentionally fail, and get it over with. That is insane. That's like the Brazilian soccer team in the locker room before the World Cup saying, you know, I hope we lose the World Cup because it'll make us better people. Said no one ever, okay? It's living with failure.
Comment on this? Because we talked about the American Cup this year, Argentina.
My first startup, I was actually not trying to fail, it turns out, even though everyone was talking about how important failure is. You just have to get over it, right? It's going to happen.
Let's
You got to live
stay
with
on
it.
this
Don't
topic for a
plan
second
it.
because I do think that it's worth it for us to dig a little deeper on the reboot, which is also a theme of GEW for this year. You know, when you face challenges, you feel like you're not really making it. There is a reset, reboot, pivot. And after General Magic, there are many stories of the individuals who are very ambitious and had this dream and vision and worked really hard to get there, to now have to face this news, the truth, we didn't make it. And there's a process of rebooting that, for example, Tony Fadell talks about 10 years that it took him to truly process the experience. He talks about how there were 2 years, maybe, when he was doing therapy on a daily basis to really make sense of what happened. And so we don't want to, you know, minimize the experience of failure because it's not just going home and saying, all right, you know, we'll start over, we'll get over it, right? There is a lot of work in that healing process. And if you don't mind, I would love to talk about that because I think it will be really, really helpful for our students who are about to fail my class to really learn how this is going to happen and how they can get tools to process the F. So, Mark, would you like to start with your process? How was your internal journey?
Yes, I would be happy to, but up to a point. It was difficult in the beginning. I remember driving on 101, which, you know, a freeway there, Silicon Valley, and going full speed, as fast as I could go. And I looked, and people were whizzing past me. And I looked at the speedometer; it was like 45 miles an hour. So I was in a distortion field where that's all I could do, and it went from there to a place where what was the most important was to repair relationships with my kids, my son and my daughter. For those of you who saw the film, you saw my daughter in there. And that was my preoccupation for a bit. And it's still, obviously, on a daily basis. It continues forever. It continues forever. That's the most important thing there is. And then there was a nothing. It was a real nothing. And the metaphor of dating, that's what happened to me. Is ideas would come to me, people would call, I'd think of ideas. One of my problems is I generate, an idea like every week for a company or something. Mm-hmm. It's a problem. So my own ideas weren't interesting. Other people's ideas, not interesting. So dating with ideas never got me anywhere. Until, at that time, suddenly climate change began to emerge in people's consciousness. And yeah, Al Gore definitely invented the internet, but more importantly, there was this rising awareness, rising consciousness. When I said that when we were all hippies back then, environmentalism was it. Rachel Carson that was the book that I read. And that's what we were doing. And we were doing civil rights, we were doing all these things, and this felt like a revolution. And I went into it, and that was a big enough idea. I mean, it's huge, it's existential, that's where I went. And that's where I am now. And well, actually now I've merged the two. Claire calls it, so there was technology, and then there was climate change. What I'm doing now is the convergence of the two. And Claire, my wife, calls it my third wave. And that's a great metaphor. I'm now in my third wave.
I love that. Awesome. And Mike, what was your process like? What was your rebooting or pivoting after General Magic?
Well, I was very lucky in that I already had an identity on the shelf waiting for me to come back to. I went back to my law firm. Most of the other magicians didn't have that kind of opportunity. So I had a role in a profession and a sense of self to step back into. So I did that, but I felt burned out, useless, and not very good at anything for a year or so. It was hard to practice, but I got there. And I did it for the next 25 years at one of the big law firms in the Valley. But I don't think that was a typical experience. Most people didn't have that ready-made thing to go back to.
Every parent in their homes are like, see, I told you have to be a lawyer or a doctor and have a professional, like be a controller. You'll never have an unemployment situation. Veronica?
I heard something recently about how the best way to release feelings of shame is to tell your story. And I really see that in the entire story of General Magic. I think you guys getting together and making the film and talking about it together, that process was obviously very healing for everyone. And then when we premiered the film, we did this huge event in San Jose for all the magicians and their families and friends, like 1,000 people in this beautiful theater. And I remember when the credits rolled, we had put everyone from the movie up on stage in chairs, and like the lights came up, and there was like this roar, like it was the most exciting like cinematic event I've ever been in. It was like this roar of applause, and I could just tell that it was so healing for everyone in the audience, the families who had been there that whole time, the people who had worked at that company, to see their story like that told on screen. Because shame is a really common feeling you have with failure. Like in our society really pressures us to not talk about those things. And I think it's really powerful in the movie to see people being vulnerable and honest about their feelings, because I think it gives the audience permission to do the same. And, since that day 3 years ago when we premiered the film, I think every single audience we've shown the movie to, like, it heals you and it heals us by you watching it. It really makes a big difference. So if you love the movie, tell other people about it, because I think that's a really powerful experience from this story.
Yeah, thank you. That's really important. And there was a piece of archival footage we didn't use. The first party we had. Remember the party we had at the Tech Museum? It's the thing in the movie where the people are doing the balloons and all that. The hubris of a startup spending money to rent the Tech Museum in San Jose for the company party. But it was the beginning of the beginning of 1993. We shot each member of the management team and their partner saying Happy New Year to the magicians. And with unscripted, with no coaching whatsoever, every one of our wives and husbands said, will you please finish the damn thing and come home? Yeah. And what the movie gave people a chance to see especially the kids, is what were their parents doing? Why were they never home? Where were they? And why did they sacrifice us to that? And I think part of the healing moment was for the families of the magicians who, you know, they had a sense of what we were doing, but it brought home to them that we suffered too. And I think that was important.
I remember you, Mark, at the premiere had the families stand up in the audience too to acknowledge them.
To thank them, yeah. And also, investing all of your passion in something is what you're told. Leave it, you know, your sports metaphor, leave it all on the field. Give it all, because if you do, that's how you succeed. The actual paradox is leaving it all on the field will result in less success. Because the family is one place that you need. Your friends is one place that you need, people that you love and that love you because of the hard times. And if you leave it all on the field, what's left of you? It's gone. What's left of you is an identity of what it is you're doing. We're not human doings. We're human beings. And to be is to keep a piece of yourself for things that are sacred. They're sacred. They will not be given to anything, including general magic, including your company, including your dream that you've worked so hard to create. Don't go there. That's my advice. Keep a piece of yourself sacred and private for the people that need you and the people you love. That's why, Veronica, at that premiere, I wanted the families to stand up and to thank them, because they took the hit. Absolutely. They took the hit. My children and my ex-wife took the hit. And they did. Why did they do that? They did that because they loved Daddy and they wanted to support Daddy. But it wasn't reciprocal. So those of you who have significant others, those of you who are married and have kids or will, give them your best energy. And I did say in the film, coming home, and I just spent like the evening at El Fornaya or something, the famous Silicon Valley place on Cowper Street, which is where we started, in a little tiny hovel there. And I had given my absolute best energy to some 12 executives who had just flown in from Mitsubishi or something. All of us did. We were brilliant. We were on. We were this. We were that. We closed the deal. And when I came home, there was nothing left. I'd left it all on the field, but the field was what? I don't even remember their names, and I don't remember what the deal was, and I don't remember any of the brilliance. Nothing. All that remains is knowing when I got home, there was nothing left, because I'd given it all. So don't do that. That's my advice.
I think it's really good that you guys address that, because we work in nearly 200 countries, but I've visited entrepreneurs in at least 100 of them. Wow. And what's funny is I teach scale. And the most common question I get is not about scaling a business. It's they look both ways and say, what do I tell my wife? What do I tell my husband, my boyfriend, my sister, my friends who I haven't seen? My friends who I hadn't seen in years because I was off building companies. My friends who I haven't seen. That's the most common question. It's crazy that I get all over the world. You're all going to deal with that. And understanding that's what you can get out of your documentary is making sure you realize before it's too late. It's interesting because as a CEO, somebody said to me, I was hiring somebody, said, how much vacation do you get? And I said, unlimited. And a friend of mine said, how can you give unlimited vacation? I said, because I only measure one thing, results. If you need to go home and take your wife on a vacation this week, go home and take your wife on a vacation. I don't count vacation. I count one thing. You have a job to do. Here are the deliverables. Get it done your way. If it got done, I don't care that you went to the beach with your family this weekend because you delivered. If it didn't get done, you're going to get fired anyway, so you're never going to use the vacation. Because my friend said, why aren't you marking it down? I said, because they'll never use it. They'll either deliver, in which case, do it your way because you're crushing it, or you're not going to work here anyway. So the beauty of entrepreneurship is we just focus on results, and everyone gets results a different way. I had a single mom who was brilliant, but there were days she was frowning. I said, what's up? And she said, I just don't want what my kid's doing at childcare right now. Yeah. And I said, why don't you get in the car and go there and spit there a couple hours and come back? Because the last 3 hours of the day, you'll do way more work if you're calm than you're doing today in broken concentration. So I said, when you need to go see your kid, leave the office. I'm not counting. Just deliver. The entrepreneurship, all people care about, all the customer cares about, they don't want to hear the story. They just want to pick up a product that works.
You still have to come to class, though. We do take attendance. So Jonathan, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I wanted to acknowledge publicly, Mark was very nice, but Monica came up to me after watching the movie and she said, so what do you think about it? And I said, I have to go excuse myself. So I was one of the people that burst into tears this morning, and I want to tell you guys that. And part of the reason I was trying to process what that was, and I think it's because you told a story for which there are hundreds of thousands of people who had a challenge with their family, who lost so much from putting it all on the field, and their stories never told. And I don't think it's even told to them. So I think that's one of the most powerful things for me. It's all the untold stories that come from that. And the second thing I'm sort of interested, to what degree do you think, and I'm just going to ask you a basic question. So to what degree do we think, I mean, because what was different about your story is that you weren't just coming up with another app, okay, and it didn't work out, and you moved on, and as I like to tell them, work it out. If it doesn't work out, recycle it, reform the team. There's no such thing as failure. But what you guys did was so fundamentally groundbreaking that it actually took every ounce of your bodies to do it, and you gave up so much, so intensely. So that came out in the film, like how deep, how significant that was. It wasn't something that was just another convenience. It was truly a sort of historical moment in American pioneering history. I mean, it was the equivalent of the invention of the automobile. It was, I mean, it's phenomenal. But what I want to know is, what's the lesson for like Elon Musk? So, I mean, I've never met Elon Musk, but I look at him as being somebody else who seems to be like absolutely doing exponential times 10 and trying to work out, So what's the message for them? Not that, I'm asking, and I don't know whether you know him, I don't know whether he asked, I don't know whether whatever, how much he knows about the story, but the point is, for someone like him, I hear you say, don't put it all on the field, but is it a whole different ballgame if you're someone that's trying to do this, times 10 type innovation?
And before you answer, I'm going to take one or two more questions from the audience. So think about your question, and then we'll wrap up the panel. Mark, would you like to answer Jonathan's question?
Well, Elon Musk is not 1 in a billion, actually. He's probably 1 in 8 billion. He's the 11th standard deviation. I mean, I don't remember what the 11th is, but that's probably 1 in 8 billion. So I can't answer that question about Elon Musk. He's amazing.
If you had to work with him, you'd want him to go to Mars and stay there.
You'd want him to go to Mars and stay there. He's an impossible person, but so is Steve Jobs. Just people who change the world in that profound way are very difficult human beings. Maybe I would have done better if I'd been a very difficult human being. I wasn't. Because what would I have done? I'd have fired people who weren't shipping. I'd have beaten them up. What Steve Jobs did, if you read the book, Walter Isaacson's book, is he humiliated people. He would take you down, he would slice you like sashimi to nothing. But he could also build you up into something that's amazing. Yeah, Elon Musk is very difficult. But I did know, and that vision that I didn't think it was a dream, kind of an impossible dream. I saw the reality of it, and that's what kept me going. And I would say that I don't have advice for Elon Musk, but I have advice that if you're one of those people, go. The world wants you, the world needs you, and you can really do it. If you're going to make an app, if you're going to make a filter for Instagram or something, that's good. That's great. Don't destroy yourself on the filter for Instagram. Not worth it.
Anybody have a question you would like to pose to the panel? Yes, go for it.
Wait.
So I would like to ask a question related to the scalability and the startup. So my question is, like, earlier times, like, people used to do business with their own resources, or like going traditional way, like raising funds from the banks or whatever the resources they have, and they successfully achieve the business what they want to do. But in the buzzword of the startup or the VC-oriented environment, why this is very much seen like everyone who is not even, doing something innovation and they are just flaunting like we are having some startup. So how you narrate the agenda in the business world?
So it sounds like maybe you could answer that question.
Yeah, summarize it though.
Yeah, so the question is, I think you're asking whether having a very like big innovation, crazy idea versus, versus what VCs invest in, which is more linear improvements to what's already in existence. Is that your question?
The small business owners also doing some great things, but
Right.
because of lack of capital from the VC or even the
Investors,
desire,
yes.
sometimes they don't want to expand. So I mean to say they are also doing something which is also startup, but
Yes.
media is not highlighting that. So
Yes.
it's a kind of, like less covering for the people who are also doing great things. So it's a, like we all have limited bandwidth. So it's up to you, even the
Yes.
person.
And I think
It's not only the person who is only spending, they are only doing startup.
Right, right. So I think it's a great Gen question because it's about, glorifying those Elon Musks, the ones that are really expanding, growing, ambitious versus SMEs, family businesses, smaller, less ambitious entrepreneurs who are not getting exposure, they're not getting capital or attention. Did I summarize? So why is that?
Well, I mean, first of all, there's no wrong answer. None of those are wrong. Running a family business is a great idea. Feeding people, creating jobs is a great idea. Innovating is also a great idea. There are some people that are going to innovate and change the world. We literally believed we could change the way people all over the world traveled, right? Unfortunately, travel agents didn't like us and a lot of other people, but we thought we could literally change an industry, and one of the biggest global ones. That was an impact thing. That was a big, sexy vision that you could tell investors that they like. But there's an entire middle section of investors that are investing in solid revenue generating ROI businesses that will not change the world. I'll give you an example. Because we do work all over the world, every time there's a successful startup here, I'm going to give you a perfect example. Waze came out of Israel. Waze was a big traffic thing here. But I worked with a group of entrepreneurs in Egypt and the Middle East. It created something called Bialik that 100 million people use. It's a copycat thing, but who cares? Because they created thousands of jobs, they've created millions in revenue, and they brought a product to their region that wasn't there yet. So none of those are wrong. You are correct that the media likes the sexy stories, right? When I was, my very first startup, I was 20-something years old and unemployed, and when you go to an airport and you check in a kiosk, you guys know those kiosks? That was my first product. It took forever to stand in line at an airport, so I went home, took out a pencil, drew a kiosk, started hiring people, got some patents in those kiosks in every airport in the world. And I got all the media because we made a lot of money and I was young. And I kept on thinking that this isn't really rocket science. I'm not changing the world. I didn't feed anybody. I didn't cure any diseases. I made a kiosk, oh boy. And the media was all over that for all the wrong reasons. So we pitched, again, I'm going to go back to why Jonathan and I are here. Part of Jen's job is to create those ecosystems, but part of the ecosystem is to shine a spotlight on people doing amazing work that aren't the sexiest stories. We actually have something that Jonathan and I do every year called the Compass Awards, where we recognize entrepreneurial ecosystems and efforts and entrepreneurs that are doing all the work that just doesn't get recognized. So we agree with you. There's no wrong answers. You do not have to be saving the world to be a good entrepreneur, but save something. Save someone, create some job somewhere. That actually is good enough. And hopefully the media, I say hopefully, but I don't even believe what I'm saying, because they're just going to tell the sexy stories, right? Your story is a very sexy story to tell. Media absolutely loves that. But there's a lot of people making the world better every single day. They're just never going to get they're just not.
You mean
they're
that
never
now
going
that
to get
you're
the
not
media.
that young anymore, people don't care
How did you
about
know that?
So we'll take one more question, and then we'll have to go to concluding remarks. Unfortunately, maybe some of the speakers can stay after to talk to you one-on-one. But go ahead, Fred.
Right. Thank you for being here.
Sorry, did I skip some of you?
What did you just learn about being polite? Yeah, that's what I thought.
Here, so if, with your permission, we'll go over a few more minutes then, and we'll take your question. Is it 2 questions or 1 question? 2 questions. Well, are you guys okay taking 3 more questions from the panel? Okay, great. They'll get hangry, but, we'll see what happens when they don't get their lunch. All right.
Well, first off, thank you for being here. It's honestly a pleasure to be with you and hear your story, where you're coming from, and what you've done. It's phenomenal. My question is just about Simon Sinek's why. And I'm an idea person as well. I'm constantly generating ideas. It's part of my DNA, I think. But how do you bring them together, all these ideas and your why? Because you don't want to split your soul into a million pieces. So that's my question.
Should we take all the questions together?
Let's take all 3 questions so we can answer them maybe combined. So can you pass the microphone, Fred? Oh, do you have? Microphone, please, because we have people from home listening.
I see. What is your favorite books?
And then the next question.
I was gonna ask. I think the interesting thing in the story is about how like the ecosystem is able to recycle your ideas and talent back into Apple after you guys started it. And I think, do you see those ecosystems expanding into other markets, or do you think that those areas draw the talent? And like, people talk a lot more about network effects now. Do you think that you have to get into those network effects and be in those markets in order to, while there's a failure, create these success stories and like have people recycle through different companies, or do you see that expanding into other markets?
Yikes, we are definitely out of time.
Did we have one more question there? Did you have a question? No? I feel like there's no women asking questions, so I'm going to wait for one woman to ask a question. There you go, in the back.
You are good after 10 years because it's not easy. I've been in that stage, and some people, they can be well again. So congratulations, you are a fighter.
Oh, thank you. See, they're always the kindest. So each one of you can take one of the questions from the audience. Books, how do you execute on your ideas, platforms, and network effects? And you choose which one you want to answer. So let's start with Mike.
Okay, easy one. Favorite book is Bleak House, Charles Dickens.
Veronica?
Why Bleak House? Because if you read this, if you know the story, it was an infinite lawsuit that never went on forever and ever and bled a fortune dry, and it went to all the lawyers. He's a lawyer. He's booking by the hour. That's why you love the story.
He probably charged somebody while he was reading that.
Exactly. There's an intersection of 2 axes, and one is passion and one is focus. And too much of each doesn't work. There's a thing of being too passionate and not passionate enough. There's a thing of being too focused or not focused enough. The answer to your question is to stay in that middle zone. And bring yourself back. Bring yourself back until you know that you've got something. And generating a lot of ideas is a good thing, but it's that intersection that I would say is the sweet spot. The other thing I wanted to say is, hashtag, am I glad you crashed our panel?
Hey, thanks.
You're welcome. If you want to build a big company in Web3, it's all about network effect, period.
So do you think you have to go to a hub like Silicon Valley or
No. Talent is equally distributed across the world. Opportunity is not. So, no.
Do you want to answer one or a couple of the questions?
I love the book question, too. Anything by Mark Twain. I recently became obsessed with Mark Twain. And I'd say, too, if anyone here really cares about racial equality in your business, to read The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson, especially if you're going to be working in America. It's about the history of the Great Migration, how it changed all of our lives. And then your question just made me think about intuition, I guess, it makes me think about storytelling and how, how do you decide what stories to tell, and to think about, what stories would you want to hear? I think it's always important to, think about yourself as the audience. And if you feel bombarded by all your ideas, to also, set boundaries with your health and stuff. I'm like that, too, where I'm like, I could do this and that, and then I'm like, I don't have time for all those things, so just trust your intuition.
A very badly written book with no literary value whatsoever is Lean Methodology, but that's the lesson that I wish I had known in 1991. Lean Methodology is what you need to do, and that's kind of going back to what you were saying. You have no idea what your product is until it's in the hands of the consumer, the customer. The customer will tell you what the product is. And what we did at General Magic is we were inventing things. Now, we thought we were inventing things for ourselves, and we were. But it didn't intersect with the market at that time.
Jeff?
I'll pick a book and tell you where it led me to. The book that really made me think was the first time I read The Alchemist. And I'm thinking about, what are you really chasing? And what are you really doing? And it kind of ties back to the Simon Sinek question about why. Why are you doing what you're doing, and what are you really looking for? That book really made me think about it a lot, and I read it more than once. And it kind of led me to, you've heard me say this before, but one of the things that's written on my board at home, because it's one of my most important principles, and one day I turned around and I wrote, don't chase money, chase excellence. Money's not fulfilling, excellence is. And that book helped me get there. The money turned out, we sold that first company, and I'm not a money person, but I was 20-something years old and unemployed, and we sold a company for over $100 million, and it was not fulfilling. Money wasn't.
I'll take it.
Okay.
I'll take it from you.
Excellence is fulfilling. So I would never have thought that to myself, that don't chase money, chase excellence, had I not gone on that journey with that book to figure out, why am I even doing this, and what do I actually want?
One more tiny thing. My nephew, Aaron Hurst, wrote a book, again, not a bestseller, but close, called The Purpose Economy. My PhD was the information economy.
Aaron's your nephew?
Yeah, Aaron. You know Aaron?
I met with him many times. I helped them with their company.
Awesome. So the purpose economy, when you boil it all down, wasn't about the economy, it was about psychology. That purpose doesn't have a vertical component. Goes back to your question, is if you're doing something incredibly modest and humble, but it gives you purpose, and you're invested in it, and there's a connection, that's worth more than $100 million. Some people would disagree with that, but that's worth everything, because that gives you the self-esteem. If you're self-actualizing, if you're, to use a kind of jargon, but if you're feeling good about yourself, it doesn't matter what level of glamour it is at all.
Exactly.
So
Thanks for having us. I did want to say that.
Yes, I have one more question, but it's just a very, very brief question, and then we'll give our thanks, if that's okay. General Magic is about magic, and I've been thinking a lot about what brings magic to your lives or careers. And I would like an answer that's tweetable, very short. For example, to me, more humor is good for business, it's good for life, it's good for health. So to me, magic in your life, increase the amount of humor and laughter, and you'll have magic. Could you answer what brings more magic to your lives, or what would you recommend that students do to bring more magic to their lives or careers?
Why don't we ask the audience, what brings magic to your life?
It will take too long, so I'll focus on the panel.
Okay.
Jeff, would you like to start? We'll go from you to the end of
Oh, mine's easy. It's the optimism of youth. When I'm out in the world and I meet with young people like you guys, and I visit schools all over the planet Earth, it just feels like anything's possible all over again. The magic of the optimism of youth.
Amazing. Mark?
Almost. For me, it's the magic of the unfolding of my little 4-year-old or 7-year-old mind when language comes in, when perception comes in, when logic comes, it's like amazing. Or when articulation of feelings, labeling of their feelings. That evolution, that rapid evolution through the 3-year-old to the 7, 8-year-old, complete magic.
Cool.
Veronica?
What comes to mind for me is seeing the world. I love traveling and I love meeting people, and it helps me, not to quote Mark Twain, my new favorite person, but he said that travel is fatal to bigotry, prejudice, and something else. But I love that quote. I think it's just a really important way. I feel more magic everywhere I go and see new places and experience planet Earth.
That's one of the foundational principles of Thunderbird, so that's great. Where there's trade, there's no war.
What about Expedia by any chance?
Yeah, I know.
Where are you booking all this travel, Veronica?
I know. I wanted to start my own New Zealand travel company, so we should talk.
Making connections, even in the panel. So Mike, and then please share what you wanted to share.
For me, it's teaching, because I find I learn more from students and colleagues than I have to impart. So it's a wonderfully fulfilling, always overflowing experience. But anyway, I just wanted to thank all of you for coming and for the program for inviting us. This was an extraordinary thing to experience, and the school is doing amazing things and being on the cutting edge of education. is such an important thing now, you know, as an ex-academic. So many important, innovative things are happening here. It was wonderful to be part of it. Thank you very much.
And to Rebecca, who is tireless in bringing people together. That's probably your magic, is the bringing together of people constantly, nonstop. It's an amazing thing, including this group.
Thank you, Rebecca.
So thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you. All of you, some of you traveled from Europe, just you know, on a red eye to be here. I know, Mark, you just stopped by here for a few hours on your way to New York. And you, both of you, have made so much time to be here with the students. I want to start lobbying for Mike to be a professor of practice here. Who would take a class from Mike? Raise your hand. Let's lobby for it, yes? Thank you all for being here. I know I had to threaten you, but I really appreciate your support. And thank you, Jonathan, for also launching the GEW globally from Phoenix. I'm really, really grateful to know all of you. Thank you.